everybody. Today I'm going to talk about some techniques that will help you parse the 14th Etude from Köhler's Opus 89 into sections so you can practice it according to your schedule and spend the majority of the time practicing the things that are different and not wasting time practicing the things that are repetitive. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that this is in C minor. But you'll notice right out of the gate, the C is not very prominently featured. What we have on the downbeat is an E flat with a grace note. So E flat would be the relative major of C minor, and this entire piece is sort of between C major and C minor, which was a technique we call mixture. The other thing is the phrasing starts early, and then we have 4-bar phrases that are pretty regular, but there are some exceptions to that. And usually when a piece is what we would call out of phase, we end up with one section where we either lose measures or add them. And I'm going to demonstrate this with a thing that's called hypermeter. So in hypermeter, we could conduct through the phrasing measure by measure. So each movement in my conducting will represent a measure, an entire measure. So I put the metronome on really slowly and recorded myself playing one measure at a time. So please conduct along with me as we go through the hypermeter for the first section of this piece. 2, 3, 4. 1. 2, 3, 4. So we could keep conducting through the piece until the phrasing reveals itself. If I kept going, I would notice that the A section is 8 measures long, so that's 2 measures of hypermeter that I'm conducting through, and then it repeats A prime. So then the B section starts exactly on time, 8 bars after that. So bar 17 of the piece. Now, as we're going through the B section, things get a little messy. You'll notice that there's a forte that is 6 bars in to the phrase. So something's happened there. We either added something, we took something away, we have half a measure, something's happened with the phrasing that we're having irregular phrasing. So taking this B section a little bit apart, it's actually 4-bar phrase, and then it's repeating 2 measures. And I came up with that phrasing because I was doing some rhythmic distortion on the B section. And you can check another video of mine where I talked about that. I also talked about it with Etude 13. We talked about rhythmic distortion. But the section starting at measure 17 is a perfect place to use that. We've got a 6th chord, the 5th bar of the B section, it goes to E flat major. So that is why it does these extra 2 measures, E flat major, then it does a 7 chord. You can see I bracketed it there. So we've got an applied chord going to G. So G is actually the dominant of C minor. For the next section, we're back to an A section. So when we want to have continuity through an allargando, you can be really cerebral about it and think of it as a subdivision. So this passage, I would think quarter note, 8th note, 16th, 32nd. As I'm subdividing tinier and tinier, it sort of naturally will slow itself down. So you can put that into your click track in your head, and then all of your allargandos will be nice and rhythmic. I like to think of them da 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 so that it's proportional. I compared all of the A sections and A prime sections to each other, so that I could figure out exactly which sections were different, and that way I could spend my time just practicing the sections that are different. One other idea that I have for measure 39 and 40. Now this section I've called C, the C section of the piece, and when you're working through a passage like this, what I like to do is play from the end forward. So it's 1. So now I can back up another 8th note. Now back up another 8th note. And I would have the metronome on while I'm doing this, backing up 8th notes until I have the entire passage. The next section is the coda. So as we come up to A prime, at the final statement of A, you'll notice that we're right back exactly the same phrase as before until the second half of A. This phrase I like to think of as the rock and roll phrase. So the way that I have parsed this out is into a rhythmic pattern. So this sounds like this. If you checked out the chords that I've written underneath, we've got a little circle progression going. So that reinforces my feeling that this passage is really like rock and roll. Now, when you're practicing this, I would spend a lot of time in my warm-up doing octaves. If you think of your embouchure just kind of like a valve, you can find the minimal amount that it takes to emit the high note and keep your embouchure as more of a generic embouchure so that the low note and the high note can both come out. If you just do a minimal movement, you can find the valve. And now when you play through the passage, you can practice all of those with more of an embouchure that's more similar than different through that passage. The last little sections here, you can see that I've written out some chords. There's a cadential 6/4 chord that's linked to a 5 chord going to a 1 chord. You'll also notice that after that octave section, the next 4 measures are the same exact chord structure that we've had in the previous. And then at the very end, we get a passing 6/6/4 between the 1, which is just a little fun color right at the end. So I hope this helps you with Etude 14.